In a world where your uncle only has 2 hands, but you have 4 cocks.
Uncle Touchy. Coming whenever he wants. All over your face, neck, and chest. Just when you thought it was safe to go back to bed. Uncle Touchy. How do, lovely listeners, and welcome back to the Disinformed podcast. I'm Shane.
I'm John.
And I'm Michael.
No, you're
Mikkel.
Hollywood Beauty.
Yeah.
I refuse to acknowledge that.
Listen,
nickname.
don't try to do my man Dark Temptation like that.
Yeah, man.
No, Hollywood Beauty's gonna get it. I believe so.
Aw.
So, this week, we are going to get into a actual listener request, and we are going to delve into the behavioral sink. And that is not
is it
where
a
you're...
sink, like an actual, like, basin? Like,
whole-
Yeah,
S-I-N-K?
no, it's not
Or
where
as
you're...
Michael would pronounce it, sink?
I know how to pronounce Sank, okay?
Sanka, you dead man?
Listen, I lived in New York for 5 years. I know how to say bagel.
That's painful. There was a big escalation in that music, which is just a lot of fun. So, we're going to dive into this nasty bit of nonsense here, but it was something that was requested by a listener, and I cannot not fulfill a request. So,
I'll give you
Still haven't
something to fill.
refilled mine.
yeah, well, there's wants and then there's no.
Legality.
Yeah, well,
Fair.
all right, Mary Kate.
Man,
So,
wait a minute.
the behavioral sink is a term invented by ethologist John B. Calhoun
What the fuck is an
describe.
ethologist?
Good luck with
Do
that.
they study E?
Yes,
Like the letter
well,
E?
ethos actually
Oh, ethos. Oh.
to describe a collapse in behavior which can result from overcrowding. So the term and concept derive from a series of overpopulation experiments Calhoun conducted on Norway rats between 1958 and 1962. In the experiments, Calhoun and his researchers created a series of rat utopias, enclosed spaces in which rats were given unlimited access to food and water, enabling unfettered population growth. Calhoun coined the term behavioral sink in his February 1st, 1962 report in an article titled Population Density and Social Pathology.
Did they
in-
dress the rats up? And
No.
Did they build them little cultures?
I mean, they did build them little apartment structures.
Because if you say that didn't happen, then no fucking deal. You guys don't have it in your head. Never mind. It's fine. I have a little picture in my head of all these rats wearing different little, like, suits or whatever.
We'll
and they're
get
going
there,
to
John.
work. Okay,
If you
sorry.
give me a moment, we'll build up to it. I mean,
It's a
you
fan
don't start
fiction.
with the orgasm. Unlike your sex life, we want to actually have a little pleasure.
Wait, you guys get orgasms?
Yes. I order them online.
Sorry, Shane. Go ahead.
Sorry, God. So, the general idea here, because I don't want to get into the actuality, because there's a long description of how they did this, but essentially, they make a square grid where, if you imagine, it's 4 separate cells. They separate 2 of the cells with an electrified fence. So there's a little segment of the fence that is electrified to keep, essentially, the folks from cell 1, which is the upper left tier, and cell 4 from having easy access to one another. So there's a single strip that connects cell 1 and 4, and then cells 2 and 3 are on the right-hand side. They are each connected to one another by 2 little sort of bridges. So this is how they've kind of configured this. And then they have these little housing complexes, which are kind of rats' nests that are 5 stories tall, which is where all of the nests are created, where they will raise and rear their offsprings. It's kind of their hovel that they go back to live to.
Okay.
So, just to give you a picture of how they describe this thing. Now, Calhoun's work became used as an animal model of societal collapse, and his study has become a touchstone of urban sociology and psychology in general. In a 1962 edition of Scientific American, Calhoun presented the results of his series of experiments conducted at the National Institute of Mental Health, NIM. That's NIMH. With his experiment, Calhoun hoped to address the casual impact of vice or social behavior of a species on their population growth. Calhoun indicated that often those studying population control, meaning how much a population is allowed to grow within its own sort of confines by the environment it chooses, etc., they will point to predation, which is the number of species that feed on a species or, utilize them as prey, disease, and the availability of food as the primary forces that impact a population density. He, however, believed that vice was more impactful, if not equally impactful, than any of the other forces. To test his theory, he placed rats in a laboratory in a converted barn, where, protected from disease and predation, and supplied with food, water, and bedding, they would breed rapidly. The one thing they were lacking was space, a fact that became increasingly problematic as what he liked to describe as his rat city and rodent utopia teemed with animals. Unwanted social contact occurred with increasing frequency, leading to increased stress and aggression. In systems with a behavioral sink, he indicated that the highest concentration of animals was in the bins established for feeding and later drinking. As such, eating, drinking, and other biological activities were thereby transformed into social activities, in which the principal satisfaction was interaction with other rats. So, to break this down into a more simplified method, whereas a rat, typically when they feed, they just do so whenever they feel the urge. So it's not that they have a set time that they go. They're just, I'm hungry, I will go find something to eat it, and then leave.
Yeah, pretty easy.
He isolated the food sources and fed them pellets, and so it made it more difficult for rats to get to the food. And so what happened is there's kind of a causal thing that would occur, which one rat would go to eat, the other rats would then follow. So rather than it being an isolated activity they would do on their own, it became a social activity, and that was the only time that they really would interact with one another other than mating. So it created this weird social construct where eating was how they would socialize with one another, and so it became less about getting sustenance so much as following the patterns set by the other rats. Which, it's time to eat now. So kind of the, ringing the bell, the cat will salivate kind of principle here.
The dog? Bullshit.
No, cats do it too.
I think what he's trying to say is that he thinks dogs are bullshit.
I couldn't agree more. Unless it's a Shih
I know
Tzu.
your opinion on this, so I'm trying to stick up there.
I'm sorry. So, they also changed this later on so that they made it to where a drinking straw was then the thing that was controlled as opposed to having a large water trough, and then drinking became the social activity.
Okay.
So they're trying to draw parallels to human behavior here, and so you'll kind of see where we're leading this as we proceed, but just, for interesting points. I know this is a little bland up front, but there's a lot of things you have to kind of explain.
And for context, we're diving in right off the gate because how dense it is.
Yes, we've got a lot
We talked
to
about this before we got in, that we're just going to try and get to it, so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, this didn't lead to starvation, which you would expect if there's trepidation. It actually made it to where everybody was, a little more inclined to go and eat and drink when necessary. And eating was less competitive than it is in the wild because they knew there was a constant food source, so it wasn't a struggle for them. However, the togetherness did negatively impact other aspects of vital modes of behavior. Courtship of sexual partners, building of nests, and nursing and care for their young were all negatively impacted by the confined quarters. Following the work of a physiologist, Hans Seil, and the thesis of Thomas Malthus, it seemed that the adrenal system of their test subjects offered the standard binary solution, fight or flight. But in the sealed enclosure, flight was impossible. As such, violence quickly spiraled out of control. Subsequently, cannibalism and infanticide followed.
Whoa.
Males became hypersexual, pansexual, and in increasing proportion, homosexual.
So you, me, and Asher.
Pretty close.
If you lock you three in a red room...
A lot of pillow biting.
Mm-hmm.
So Calhoun labeled this vortex a behavioral sink, which is where their normal natural inclinations would change based on their circumstances. And so he eventually theorized, and this is going to be the fun part here, John will appreciate this, he theorized male sexuality, unchecked by the feminine maternal purpose and general empathy, will be the element most likely to lead to eventual societal collapse.
Duh.
Say that slower.
Male sexuality,
Okay,
unchecked by feminine maternal purpose and general empathy,
got it.
is the element most likely to lead to eventual societal collapse.
Here, let me describe it a little bit. Sausage fests always end badly.
Because sausage is gross.
Male sexuality unchecked by another stimuli
no.
is basically going to be the thing that kills everybody.
Okay. I mean,
I liked my description pretty
He's
well.
not wrong.
no, you know what, Michael?
Stop masturbating.
I was going
We're
to say I'll
recording,
clap my
goddammit.
hands later.
So,
my
as
hands
evidence of his
later.
assertion, the rodent population numbers fell into terminal decline and eventually tailed off to extinction. If they had allowed everyone to remain in the enclosure, they would have ceased breeding altogether. At the experiment's end, the only animals still alive had survived at an immense psychological cost. Asexual and utterly withdrawn, they clustered in a vacant, huddled mass. Even when reintroduced to normal rodent communities, these socially autistic animals remained isolated until death.
You mean acoustic?
They're acoustic, yes.
Call
In
that.
the words of one of Calhoun's collaborators, rodent utopia descended into hell. Given these bleak conclusions, Calhoun's experiments with rats and mice proved extremely influential in further research, as well as serving for the inspiration for a wealth of creations in fiction.
Now, don't let that detract from all the works that came from the rat community out of this. A lot of great rat movies, a lot of great rat albums. Through this struggle and all the tests that they were put through,
Hey, listen.
they really came out.
Pain
Rat
is
literature.
inspiration. I agree, yes. So, to paraphrase some of what he said specifically in here, you will appreciate this. So, this is what he described the behavior discovered in the experiment. Many female rats were unable to carry pregnancy to full term, or to survive the delivery of their litters if they did.
Oh, man.
An even greater number, after successfully giving birth, fell short in their maternal functions. Among the males, the behavior disturbances ranged from sexual deviation to cannibalism, and from frenetic overactivity to a pathological withdrawal from which individuals would emerge to eat, drink, and move about only when other members of the community were asleep.
As you do.
The social organization of the animals showed equal disruption. The common source of these disturbances became most dramatically apparent in the populations of our first series of 3 experiments, in which we observed the development of what we called a behavioral sink. The animals would crowd together in greatest number in one of the 4 interconnecting pens in which the colony was maintained. As many as 60 of the 80 rats in each experimental population would assemble in one pen during periods of feeding. Individual rats would rarely eat except in the company of other rats. As a result, extreme population densities developed in the pen adopted for eating, leaving the others with sparse populations. The thing that we're not touching on here is that what happened is that there were sexually dominant males that also took over the other 3 cells. Mm-hmm. So they would guard the bridge separating the enclosures and not allow other males to go across, but they would allow the females that they kept in their enclosure for breeding to pass back and forth to eat.
Did they wear adorable little gladiator outfits?
No, they wear popped collars and...
I was actually... They wore pimp suits.
I'm
and
sorry.
they had a pimp cup.
Better.
You know that I was ahead of this meant...
Yes.
Please just try to imagine everything as them dressed up
Rats
in
in
different
clothes.
societal
Yes.
roles,
Mhm.
and it makes it so much better for me.
Ah.
Sorry, it's just I'm dying inside from thinking about all the outfits,
Yes.
and costume changes and scenery
Little
changes
French
within
maid
it.
rats just running about
It's,
feather dusting things. Yes,
Since,
I know.
since Michael will know this, it's the South Park episode with the sea monkeys,
Okay.
with Sea-ciety, and
Right,
they're
right.
What's South
He didn't
Park?
see it.
Fuck.
John.
Before you continue, I do want to specify, just for everyone, that I do have a little bit of knowledge of this topic.
Okay.
There's a great YouTuber. His name is Fredrik Knudsen. He does a
No one-
series called
are we
Down
not
the
doing this
Rabbit Hole,
anymore?
where he covers
No,
stuff
these
like
are rats, Michael.
this. But he does, he has a 22-odd minute long thing on the mouse utopia experiments, where he actually does show the diagrams of the most famous one, the one where you describe the 4 quadrants and
But
everything.
these are rats.
You're not-
Motherfucker.
Okay, all right, I deserve this. I deserve this
yeah.
for all the times you had references in the last episode that you presented, and I just ignored them.
Okay.
I deserve it.
I realize this thing is a lead balloon, so I will burrow through this as quickly as possible.
Trying to
just so
think
that we
about the
can get
last
to
time
happy.
it was this dense. Was it
Stanford Prison Experiment.
Yeah, this
Yep.
reminds me exactly of
Yeah.
Prison
A
Experiment.
lot of facts. So we're getting to the fun part, so just give me a moment.
Oh,
and then
this
we
is
can
already
start,
fun.
We'll start riffing
For-
on
I
the
mean-
craziness here.
Well, because you're writing your own fan fiction as he's going.
Oh yeah, there's Sonic High going on in my head right now
Also-
with rats.
we
Wait.
don't kink shame Michael. Stop trying to put that on him.
Have
if he
you-
wants to imagine the rats in outfits fucking each other, that's fine.
Did
Yeah,
you?
they all look like me.
Have you actually read Sonic High?
No, but I know that it exists.
There is, because it's kind of related. Because the person I just listed, he's a voice actor in it. But there's another YouTuber called the Internet Historian
Oh,
that
my good
in his
God.
other channel he actually does a live reading involving other.
Do you want to tell Shane what Sonic High is? Just real quick.
Sonic, but everyone's in high school, and
It's like an anime. It's like Sonic anime, but
We're
Slice
referring
of
to
life.
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes.
Purportedly.
yes.
Okay. All right.
slice of life Sonic, but in high school.
I'm riveted.
Poorly
I can tell
written,
by your
probably.
erection.
Yes, well, I can't hide that. Now, for the fun part, this is a fact that just staggered me, so I had to include it. In the experiments in which a behavioral sync developed, infant mortality ran as high as 96% among the most disoriented groups in the population, leveled out at about 80% overall. So, 80% of the infants died. 96 in the worst cases. So, 4% of the rats lived. Perhaps the strangest of all types that emerged among the males was the group that I have called the probers. These are incel motherfuckers. These animals, which always lived in the middle pens, took no part at all in the status struggle. Nevertheless, they were the most active of all the males in the experimental populations. They dressed up with puka shells and went out to...
In my head, they look like Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3.
Yes, they wear fluffy hats and cry about everything. And so they persisted in their activity in spite of attacks by the dominant animals. So, the gatekeepers, they would go get their ass kicked and then return back to their previous activities. In addition to being hyperactive, the probers were both hypersexual and homosexual. And in time, many of them became cannibalistic.
So they were aggressively butt-fucking.
Apparently. They were always on the alert for estrus females.
Before incel community, they're gonna. Is this like telling the future? ESPN.
I mean, apparently.
They're gonna start
Apparently?
Apparently.
the incel
Purportedly,
community is just
apparently.
gonna just start
Apparently.
butt fucking and then cannibalize.
So, if there were no estrus females in their own pens, they would lie in wait for long periods at the tops of the ramps that gave on the brood pens and peer down into them. So they were, like, hard staring at the girls like, yeah, you know you want it. I'm coming for you,
Just see
baby.
a rat just start licking its nipple.
Just doing a slow rub with its tail, like,
I see you're thinking it.
stop touching yourself, John.
Ever had rat in your mouth?
You gonna now. Spat that. Rat chat. They always turned and fled as soon as the territorial rat caught sight of them. Even if they did not manage to escape unhurt, they would return to their vantage point soon after. The probers conducted their pursuit of estrus females in an abnormal manner. Mating amongst rats usually involves a distinct courtship ritual. You meet her on Tinder, you send her a few messages, you take her out on a nice date, you buy her a lovely dinner,
Then you
you
never
don't
talk to
put
her
your
again?
finger in her asshole on the first time. I'm sorry, I misread.
You do.
So,
That was on his personal notes.
in the first phase of the ritual, the male pursues the female. So, Twitter, etc. She thereupon retires for a while into the burrow. I don't know why the Weasleys have anything to do with this, but...
Get the fuck out of here, Ronald.
And the male lies quietly in wait outside, occasionally poking his head into the burrow for a moment, but never entering it. So we play a game of just the tip.
Just for a second, just to see how it feels.
In the wild, for the forms of the Norway rat that's the course of the study, the phase usually involves a courtship dance on the mound at the mouth of the burrow.
What's the song they dance
So
to?
you start flash dancing out there to,
Shut up and dance?
Or maybe Purple Rain, if you want to get
Ooh,
dramatic, you know?
Yeah.
Swing that tail around a little. The female at last emerges from the burrow and accepts the male's advances. So attrition is a part of all forms of sexual activity.
This
Doesn't
all could be
matter.
a Wes Anderson claymation or like stop animation movie.
It's the 40-year-old virgin in action.
Basically.
Even in disordered communities in the middle of the pens, this pattern was observed by all the males who engaged in normal heterosexual behavior. So you go, you flash dance in front of the cage, she comes out and she does a little dance with you later on.
Jazz pause.
The probers, however, would not tolerate even a short period of waiting at the burrows in the pens where the accessible females lived. As soon as the female retired to a burrow, a prober would follow her inside. Not being asked, just forces his way in. On these expeditions, the probers, of course, took advantage of the female, and then often found the dead young lying in the nests. As a result, they tended to become cannibalistic, and later in months of the population's history.
Oh, I
Yeah,
just
so
had
this
a
gets
terrible... Oh, no. Oh,
now imagining them as characters is getting to be a little fucked up for me. I'm just going to think that they're just rats for now.
Because I just made the connection to a certain beginning of a certain book that had a movie that we recently saw. Canny!
Yeah.
Canny.
Now, on the topic of canny, it's fun because we're going to get to our sponsors this week.
Oh, no.
This week...
Mother of Pearl.
You're going to need Pearl Jam
Who's
at
Pearl?
this point. Grandma Pearl.
Grab my pearl. Wait.
Do it. We are brought to you by People Meat. Living a cannibalistic lifestyle these days is difficult. Your activities are riddled with social stigmas and extradition treaties, and cutting the flanks off cadavers isn't exactly appetizing now, is it? So how do you go about getting your preferred proteins without resorting to serial murder? Well, that's where People Meat comes in. People Meat makes it easy for you to get high-quality, humanely raised meat that you can trust. Every month, they deliver 100% protein-fed and finished long pork straight to your door with free shipping. The incredible quality of People Meat's product is ensured first by their commitment to humanely raised humans that are never given antibiotics or added hormones. Next, all meat is harvested and packaged at the peak of freshness, shipped with dry ice in individual vacuum-sealed pouches, and sent straight to your home. Eat the meat you've always dreamt of with no blood on your hands whatsoever. Our collection of Eastern European and Asian ranchers believe in the healthier food system, where everyone has access to the meat as nature intended, free of antibiotics and hormones, and without judgment and stigma of so-called civilized society. People Meat ensures that you can get quality cuts of mindless mouth breathers with no formal charges, due process, or fear of Turkish prisons. Just mouth-watering morsels at premium prices. Each pack comes to you with 11 pounds of prepackaged person, each tailored cut to your exact specifications. And at only $1,500 a month, you won't believe how affordably you can consume your favorite human organs. Use our offer code MEATME at checkout to get free spleens for the life of your subscription, plus an additional 20% off your first box. That's offer code MEATME at checkout for spleens and 20% off at peoplemeat.org. People Meat. It tastes like freedom.
Now, important question. It says free from, antibiotics and all that. Does it still have fear? Because I need the fear to be in the meat. Because fear in the meat is what makes the meat taste good.
You can specify that.
It's part of your meat selection
I
program.
can do that. It's kind of like an ad ranch on my Grubhub.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So as long as they're afraid before they die, that's...
They don't put any antibiotics in them. That's it. I mean, they'll still chase them around with a chainsaw.
What if I want them to
them
have a tint of heroin?
I mean, the John Frasanti version of it is available. You just have to kind of
He's
wait
back from the dead.
And you'll eat him soon. So.
Yeah. I do appreciate that they give different options for peak freshness.
Yes.
You can always order a sort of veal-like if you want, if you like them a little more tender. Or you can have them aged a bit, too.
Hey, listen, if we've learned anything from Albert Fish, it's that the buns are always the tastiest part of the small people. So we want to make sure that we get that as a specified option.
Never thought I would understand such a horrible and dark reference. I I want my Shane Hunt obscure reference award
Yes,
sticker.
you'll have a
please.
sticker by the end of this show.
Thank you.
Guaranteed.
Huh? Sean Hunt's obscure reference.
Cian Hunt.
So,
Cian,
thank you for People Meet. We're so happy to have you as a sponsor, and it's a niche audience, but, someone somewhere is going to want to eat somebody.
Yeah, we don't shame anybody.
I just want to eat
except
somebody.
everyone.
I want to feel
person,
the heat of
every
somebody.
single one.
I don't kink shame.
I mean,
You
I
are
don't-
a kink shame.
I'm ashamed of my meat, but I don't meat shame. So, controversy exists over the implications of Calhoun's experiment. The psychologist Jonathan Friedman's experiment recruited high school and university students to carry out a series of experiments that measured the effects of density on their behavior. He measured their stress, discomfort, aggression, competitiveness, and general unpleasantness. He declared to found no appreciable negative effects. Now, granted, this took place in 1975. I'm also fairly certain he didn't separate the kids from each other with an electrified fucking fence.
Yeah.
So, you might have a different set of stimuli that's created there.
Ethics these days.
It's difficult when you try to draw a correlation and, to animal behavior and human behavior.
Yeah.
It's just, we're always going to have a weird thing. But anyway, continuing. The researchers argued that Calhoun's work was not simply about density in a physical sense, as number of individuals per square unit area, but about the degrees of social interaction. So how is this happening? Is because of the food source being restricted and all these other things. Now, with that said, there's also a social psychologist named David Bixenspan who concluded in an article in Scientific American in July 2017 that there is a definite parallel present when viewing the Y generation, which is this current batch, a group whose social behaviors are greatly impacted by population density, aided by a profound sense of social detachment due to the ready availability of technology, which acts as a sort of social prosthesis.
Wait, you mean Gen Z? Because technically we're Gen Y.
You're right, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
I must have actually written that down improperly.
Because
So-
we're millennials. Because Gen X is before us.
Correct.
I still consider you millennial.
You
'Cause
should.
it's-
Even though technically I'm like a Xennial, I think is how they call it. It's like
Oh,
that
where you're on
micro
the
generation. So yeah, I'm 1981. For all those playing the home
then I
game.
guess technically you would count as the end of Gen Z. 'Cause
Yes, but I am at the end. I'm basically still technically considered a millennial, but I digress.
Yeah, fair.
But in any event, this is the funny. So with the social prosthesis, he says, could it be that the escapist nature of technological dependency is a symptom of population density? So Bixenspan's essentially asking, is this the societal coping mechanism to help abate the agitation and insecurity of living on top of one another for prolonged periods? So saying we see a lot of the same habits in modern day teenagers and early adults, in that they're socially withdrawn, they won't answer the door when the doorbell rings, they have difficulty interacting with one another in person, which is why all of these apps, like you can't hail a cab anymore, you have to have an app that you call somebody who's not a licensed driver, and all this other nonsense. Like he makes a lot of really bizarre parallels to saying how this generation is sort of showing the end result
boomer.
of population density. I know. It's kind of nuts.
Nice.
But I also work in a group that is talking about this in our customer service model and saying that they're having difficulties with having individuals approaching, like someone of my generation interacting with someone who's in 18 or 19 at the moment. Doesn't know how to approach another human being, doesn't know how to... They actually talk about it like, oh, this is a problem. Like, kids today don't like to approach other people. They don't know how to initiate conversations. Really bizarre stuff.
I can actually attest to that a little bit. I would say that the students, I can't say they're kids because they're college age,
Right.
but the students I teach, I'm definitely seeing, even going back from, the first time I taught to more now, they're more hesitant to ask questions, even if I could see that they're genuinely struggling, and that a lot of them don't necessarily like working with groups and would rather be on their phones or something like that. I'll also say that I have a decent deal of social anxiety. I don't like dealing with people I don't know.
No.
And you might not have seen it because, well, maybe,
We're on a podcast right now. Yeah.
Well, but
Clip it.
Ouch. But typically when I'm in very large groups of people that I don't know, I'm very quiet and withdrawn.
Yeah.
But I'll eventually warm up. It feels different when trying to interact with some of these other students where like, I'll see that they might not be doing the work or something like that, or they're doing it and they're not doing it well.
Right.
So I have to be a lot more attentive to those, like, especially the more younger students. So I do see that.
Yeah. I mean, the microcosm they pointed to in the course of the article, which stood out to me, was the fact that you can see, whereas in my generation, groups of individuals would go out and take, part in activities together. Now you have groups of teenagers sitting at a table together, all of them on their phones, none of them interacting with the individuals that are in their actual proximity, but interacting with other people from afar, or they have to text each other while sitting close to one another. So there has to be some sort of a detachment present. So I don't see how that, again, correlates to the way that a rodent population behaved in the 60s, but
I mean, I'll attribute the incel movement to behavioral sync, but
sounds
other than
reasonable.
that, I feel
They're
that's
called
not too bad.
probers, so.
Yeah.
R/probers.
The Inquisitors.
So, we'll paraphrase a bit of this. So the article that was originally published in 62 came at a time where overpopulation was a subject of great interest, and so there was a lot of cultural influences that kind of came to bear at the same time, so people were really interested by it. And this was directly referenced in works of fiction, many of which, had like a profound influence on things that were published later on. So Calhoun then phrased much of his work in anthropomorphic terms in a way that made his ideas highly accessible to a lay audience. Anthropomorphic, for those playing at home, means that it's given human characteristics. So the interpretation is that humans would behave similarly, so let's put clothing on the rats and somehow make them humanized.
Ooh, come full circle.
So Tom Wolfe then wrote in his wrote about this concept in the article, "Oh, rotten Gotham, sliding down into the behavioral sink," which was later made into the last chapter of the Pump House Gang. That's a
That sounds
porn
like
title for you.
Damn it!
Starring Madison Ivey, no less.
Yes, indeed. So then Lewis Mumford, which
And Sons.
again, a lot of these names.
I was drinking, I couldn't.
So many people say that these days. It also referenced Calhoun's work in The City in History, stating, "No small part of..." One of our bandmates keeps texting us, and it keeps popping in the middle of right where I'm trying to read, and I am going to kill her in
You
a
should
small
just
moment.
call her and say, "Hey, I'm recording. Can you leave me the fuck alone?"
It would be nice. So no small part of this ugly barbaration has been due to sheer physical congestion. A diagnosis now partly confirmed with scientific experiments with rats, for when they are placed in equally congested quarters, they exhibit the same symptoms of stress, alienation, hostility, sexual perversion, parental incompetence, and rabid violence that we now find in the megalopolis.
Megalopolis?
Megalopolis.
You were going to lead into something.
No.
I'll have you know.
So now, the fun part. Calhoun's work was subsequently referenced in comic books, including Batman, and later as a foundation for the character Judge Dredd in 2000 AD, where again we see a vast overpopulation that is controlled through excessive violence, and it's interesting. Calhoun essentially pointed to the social breakdown as a spiritual death with reference to bodily death, and the second death mentioned in the biblical book of Revelation. Okay, I've had enough of Calhoun. But later on, Calhoun's work with rats
like a
inspired a 1971 children's book, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, by Robert C. O'Brien, which was then subsequently adapted into a 1982 animated film, The Secret of Nim.
Oh.
Nim, by the way, as we all recall,
That's why you fucked me when you said Nim earlier.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or very early on.
I
know.
Actually sit up because I slid down in my chair. I knew
He had an active
about
orgasm.
I did. I'm gonna have to clean that up.
No, we'll clean it up.
Oh, well, thank you. I know that I've heard about the National Institute of Mental Health before, but I even have seen some video that dissected The Secret of Nim with that context.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I never made the connection, Nim, and...
Well, and now go back and watch the film or read the book in relation to this experiment. It puts an entirely new complexion on the story. It's quite strange because, of course, Mrs. Frisbee's husband is a part of the experiment, and then they have these hyper-intellectual rats that are also part of the experiment that were brought back and try to create their own colony, and it's a weird sort of utopian bit. Very odd. So, in any event, in summation, we're finally to the end here, boys.
I can see it.
Towards the end of his career, Calhoun, who died in 1995...
Maids.
He was not a prober, thank you, I'm sorry. He would be increasingly dismayed that it was a simplified negative message, population density equals pathology, that was more commonly associated with his work, making his contribution seem not only flawed in the human context, but dangerous. In the words of the sociologists Fisher and Baldassare...
Baldassare!
A red-eyed, sharp-fanged obsession about urban life stalks contemporary thought. So there's a happy, uplifting moment for you.
That's 3 deep, 5 me, man.
Oh, my lord. So in focusing upon crowding, not only were the benefits of dense city living ignored, like, because we'd never have that John Mayer song, City Love.
She leaves her toothbrush in my place.
Yes. As if I have the extra space. Such as poverty and inequality. Oh, man. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to start the thing over. In focusing upon crowding, not only were the benefits of dense city living ignored, but other causes of human pathology, such as poverty and inequality, were neglected. So yet Calhoun's work considered many of these factors, suggested how they could be overcome, and as such his role deserves reconsideration. That was a lot of stuff to kind of like try to boil down to bare bones here, because like I was telling John earlier, it was an 11-page report in Scientific American that I had to read for his alone, and then other people breaking down the report as to what the social mores and things were that were implied in it.
So how'd you fuck us?
How did I get the lie by?
Yeah.
No other end guests here before I.
No, I tried to call one, and we just kind of moved.
When you mentioned that you were doing it, I'm like, oh, I'll catch those lies because, I watched the video on it.
Also,
and
this is the first listener request one, so I was trying just to take the info. And I knew about the 11 page, so I kind of just wanted to hear what you had.
I mean, it's an interesting topic.
That is true.
I agree. So, lie number 1.
There were no rats.
They did wear costumes from the start.
Yes, they actually had them all wearing dresses like the Stanford prison experiment because he wanted to emasculate the rats.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked.
So, this was... It's funny because you've known me for a long time, John, so I'm amazed you didn't call me on this because this was actually something I claimed for a long time. So the theory that male sexuality unchecked by feminine maternal purpose and general empathy is the element most likely to lead to eventual sexual collapse... That is a Shane quote. That is not something theorized. I have always said that male sexuality unchecked by a woman's rationale and logic is the most deadly weapon on the planet.
Oh, I totally...
Okay, no, I think it got overshadowed by my favorite Shane one, which is that you are, or we are, but for the quote, you are living, breathing proof that you can't fuck crazy with impunity.
Yes. That's going on a t-shirt at some point.
Can that, please?
Yes.
I would buy it.
That's a Disinformed
coffee
podcast shirt.
Hey,
yeah,
when we start doing swag, that'll be the first one.
Living, breathing proof you can't fuck crazies with impunity.
So the reason why I didn't call that out was because I honestly thought, given the context of like when it was written, which was the late 50s, sexism, it was still very rampant.
Yeah.
I mean, was it Mad Men is a great...
Hey, do you watch Mad Men?
No, but have you heard the theme?
I have heard the theme song.
But that and The Wolf of Wall Street, like, similar era, very, very sexist, though I think that was more the 70s, I guess. But still, like, that rampant sexism, like, that comment elicited those sort of emotions to me. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And considering that the rampant homosexuality and the
hypersexuality
and the pansexuality and all that stuff, yes, that made sense to me, and so blew it right over my head.
Yep, I tried to ensconce it, and it made sense in the context of the conversation. So that's lie number 1. Lie number 2 is that there is a social psychologist named David Bixenspan who wrote an article that relates to this in 2017. All of that nonsense is me. So, that's why I was waiting for you to tell...
I wanted to make a joke, but
yeah, I wanted to make a joke on Bixenspan. Also, was it last episode with Broom? Is it you with Broom?
Oh,
Trevor
it ends
Broom?
with an E. No, Fiona Broom. Broome.
Oh, Fiona. What do you stand for?
It probably is something like Bromy or something.
There are
but-
3 people probably
Bromy,
that
I
listen to
hardly know
this.
you.
There is David Bixenspan is actually a journalist that covers professional wrestling. So
Of course
you'll
it
appreciate
fucking
this.
is.
Yeah. But that's why I stole the name, because I was like, there's 3 people that listen to, the 605 Super Podcast who are going to get a kick out of the fact that I dropped that. But also why I screwed up with the Y generation and didn't say Generation Z,
Because it
because
was
I
fake.
didn't know what the hell I was talking about.
Oh!
So you could have, you pounced on it and you didn't actually nail the dismount. So you were on the trail, you had it in the wild, you just let it go.
Because
You had
I've
it by
never
the
made
ears
up
and you didn't even
full.
put your dick in it.
I've never made up full sections that were complete. I don't think
Fabrications? Yeah. No, that was a paragraph and a half of me just bullshitting about what the correlation is to the current, generation. And I even improvised the bit about the teenagers and the cell phones not interacting with one another. So.
I mean, I said the
Vamping.
okay boomer because, the kids these days, they
Yeah.
need to interact
Okay,
with
Zennial.
Yep. Thank you.
Zoomer.
So,
Zoomer.
I've heard that.
Zoomer sooner.
Yeah.
Go Tide.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Roll
Damn
Tide,
Zoomers.
indeed.
So-
So that's it. That's what
Do you
I
want
have.
to? Do you want to also appropriate
I don't.
my no elevator?
I
pitch?
could care less about the elevator pitch. They've already listened to the episode, so I don't see what 30 seconds at the end of having sat through this
I
is going to get
like
you.
Michael's elevator pitches.
Yeah,
and
that's
I
great.
liked
And you
the
can keep
one
them.
time I did
All
it.
right. Well, I guess.
There were a bunch of rats. Listen, this is the summation.
Okay.
In spite all their rage, they were still just rats in a cage.
You know what?
Accidentally
I'll take it.
works.
Yeah.
The world is a vampire.
I will take your sarcasm seriously.
Good. Well, I think that is going to do it for this riveting and rat-like edition of the Disinformed podcast. Thank you all for hanging out with us. We sincerely appreciate it. If you want to check us out on the networks, which are social, if you want to avoid contact with your friends sitting in a booth somewhere and stare at your cell phone as opposed to actually talking to people, you can do so. Find us on Instagram at Disinformed Podcast. We're at Facebook.com/Disinformed Podcast and on Twitter at Disinformed Pod. If you like what we do, go ahead, give us a rate us and review. I screwed
rate
that up.
us so hard.
Rate us.
Oh, please don't.
If you like what we do, rate and review. Go find us on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play and give us a happy and rousing rendition of why you love our silly little Chatterbox podcast. But until next time, I am Shane.
I'm John.
And I'm Michael.
Thank you for coming. Don't worry. We'll clean it up.
With rats dressed up as adorable gladiators.
Red rat.
Red rat.
Red rat in your mouth, bitch.